Welcome everyone. I declare this council meeting, the planning meeting for the Port Phillip City Council open, and I welcome members of the public that are here tonight. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willem clan of the Boonwurrung, pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their traditional relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted, and there's a time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time. And during public question time, members of the public can ask specific questions on planning matters other than those that are relating to a topic that's on the agenda tonight. There's also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question and or make a comment on a specific item on tonight's agenda, and this will be done prior to the committee hearing the item. If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that's available at the table just outside the chambers and hand it to a staff member. I encourage you to limit your questions and comments to around 3 minutes and try to avoid repeating any points that have been previously made by other speakers. And please note that this committee can only address questions and deal with items within its delegation, and that is planning matters. The decision of this committee is final and can be acted upon. Please note all planning committee meetings are now being live streamed. Live streaming and recording allows the community to watch and to listen to meetings in real time, providing access to council decision making and debate and improving openness and transparency. The live stream of this meeting is available on council's website, on the Facebook page, and the recording of this meeting will also be available to view a few days after the meeting on council's website and YouTube channel. The cameras will film and record councillors at this meeting. However, care is taken not to film or record images of members of the public. If a member of the public asks a question or makes a comment about an agenda item, they'll not be filmed, but their voice will be heard in the live stream and recorded. And please also note, in accordance with Council's local law, that this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped unless permission is granted by the Chair. And in the very unlikely event of an emergency evacuation, please follow the instructions of the Chief Warden. Okay, go to item 1. Apologies.
Councillor Simic is going to be a bit late.
He's going to be a bit late. Okay, we won't acknowledge him as an apology just yet then. So
great.
Thank you, Councillor Gross. Item 2 is minutes of the previous meeting, and they have been circulated, which was the Planning Committee meeting held on the 12th of December 2018. Are there any questions relating to these minutes? There are none, so can I have a motion to confirm these minutes? Councillor Gross to move and Councillor Baxter to second. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict in any matters being discussed at tonight's meeting? I note there are none. Item 4, which is public question time, and we have no one that's requested to speak in public question time tonight. So we'll move to councillor question time. Councillors, do you have any questions relating to planning matters? There are none. We're speeding through this agenda. So we'll go to the substantive items for tonight, and first of all we'll go to item 6.1, which is 18 Candle Road, Port Melbourne. And we have one person that's requested to speak, and two, I apologise. So I'll go to the order that they're on here. Janet Onley, please. Welcome. Please have a seat. If you could just pop on the microphone and state your name and suburb for the record. Thank you.
Hi, Janet Onley, St Kilda East. So I'm representing the Owners Corporation today and act on their instructions for 220 Ingalls Street. Now, our view is that any permit should reference the OC rules and satisfy the Owners Corporation rules. So far, they've bypassed the Owners Corporation and haven't submitted anything for approval. So we're requesting that it's going to have quite a significant impact on the common property, whereby, their construction side, so construction vehicles, rubbish, noise as well. We want to make sure that they satisfy the Owners Corporation rules and that's approved first. Obviously, they're going to be quite, the planning permit, and if there's any expenses incurred by the Owners Corporation in considering approving the works, including drafting any legal agreements or ongoing management and oversight of any agreement, this must be paid by the applicant. And, things like structural engineering reports to be submitted to the Owners Corporation prior to them giving their approval. So, basically, we want to make sure that the OC are satisfied and happy with the proposal before, it's approved through the planning. I think that's it.
Thank you, Ms Onley. You have a question? Councillor Crawford?
Could I ask a question, please? So if they were to put through all of the processes for the Owners Corporation and they satisfied them, are you in principle against the actual addition of the sun deck?
Not so much. It's more so how they're going to conduct the work. So, we're concerned about the people they're going to have on site and how they're going to manage the works itself, not so much what's going up and what's being proposed.
Mr Borg, I'm wondering if you could address sort of the order of how things occur from a planning perspective.
Through you, Madam Chair. The order really is to obtain a planning permit first. So the planning permit is independent of the Owners Corporation Act. That's a separate process. There will also be a building permit that's required as part of the process. So what we're considering tonight is a planning permit application, and that planning permit application on its merits, we say through the recommendation, is supportable. Certainly the applicants will need to go through and obtain a building permit through the process. The next stage would also be to talk to the Owners Corp and make sure that they comply with all the rules and requirements that are required under that Act. So they're independent of each other, even though they are linked to that point, but we can't put on controls that are not relevant to the Planning and Environment Act.
Councillor Brand.
Could I just ask a related question on the process? For the building permit, which will cover all the engineering and safety issues, the owner of the land, which should be the Owners Corporation, they need to sign the builder's permit, but they don't need to sign the application. Sorry, they need to sign the application for the building permit, but not their planning permit. The planning is independent of the owner, but the building permit does require the owner to give consent. The Owners Corp.
Through you, Madam Chair, the buildings themselves are actually independent, so there's no party walls. So the building permit would still be independent. So the owner would need to get their own structural advice and structural engineers to do the work to make sure the upper floor can stand up. One of the things that council's building surveyors would ensure is the protection works notices, so the neighbours are informed of the development, particularly when a building is going above another building, so ensure there's no collapse issues, so they're always informed. A private surveyor has a discretion to either issue protection works notices or they don't have to, but I can tell you the council building surveyors would always, as a practice, require protection works notices.
Thank you very much, Mr Borg. Thank you very much, Miss Onley. Miss Yvonne Bartonek, hopefully I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, you did.
Please have a seat, and if you could state your name and suburb, please, for the record.
My name's Yvonne Bartonek from Melbourne. I'm a committee member of the Owners Corporation where this 18 Kendall Road is at the moment. Now, basically, what I'm going to say today is what Janet has said previously. The thing is, we understand, we support we don't object to the planning application in principle, right? What we're trying to achieve is that because from past experiences or from other developments, sometimes because the building permit is issued by a separate or private building surveyor, people just issue it, and next thing you know, the builders rock up, they've started doing this, that, and everything, and the Owners Corporation has no say in anything. Right? We understand, like what the gentleman said, it's a separate thing, but there are also times when, I'm not saying that it's going to be this in this instance, where people just rock up and Owners Corporation, what are they left with? Because it's going to affect the roads in front of common property. There's going to be neighbours on the side. There are people using those roads. How are you going to manage the rubbish? How are you going to manage all? And Owners Corporation have to think of the public liability insurance as well. If the proper protection works, or the proper waste management or the noise and all is not doing, because then they're going to have the rest of the owners in the area or occupants in the area chasing them for all these transgressions. You see? So is there something that council can do? I don't know, maybe put it on a permit that everything that is allowed to do or to be done needs to be cleared off with the body corporate manager first, body corporate first. So that at least there's something, because otherwise then the body corporate, if there's nothing there, the body corporate will have to spend time, money and effort. Let's say, for example, if a road builder comes in, they have to take the builder to court, and by that time things have developed such a way that it might be too late. So what's the protection that the Owners Corporation have?
Thank you, Ms. Bartonek.
A
councillor may take up that question on your behalf. So, Councillor Crawford, you would like to take up that question?
Yes, I would like to take that question up through you, Madam Chair. So is there any protection for the Owners Corporation in the case that if they don't sign off the work early and things go wrong, what are they left with, or is there some kind of protection they can put in place prior?
Through you, Madam Chair, the matters that have been raised are all valid matters. The difference is with normal development, they would be on public roads and council would have some control. These are all developed, the road network through there is private roads, so it is an Owners Corporation controlled area, so they would need to meet the requirements of the Owners Corporation. So under the legislation that's available, that's how it would work. So you would need to go through the normal process of they would need to seek the advice and support of the Owners Corporation. That would be part of the process, and they would also need to ensure they get the appropriate approvals. Otherwise, they're using land that's not theirs to construct the building on.
Follow up, Councillor Crawford, or would you prefer Ms. Rosick?
Through you, Madam Chair, what Mr. Borg said is correct. If you had issues with the building surveyor, you could report that to the Victorian Building Authority. So there is a complaints line on the website. Also, as Mr. Borg intimated, it is an Owners Corporation issue, but there is an Owners Corporation Act which you can refer to, which has information, but also Consumer Affairs Victoria has a lot of information on there that you can refer to, and also indicates what they need to provide to you as an Owners Corporation. So there are other government bodies that can help you, and we can send you those links if you like, if you approach a council officer. And just to add one more thing, in terms of noise, which was raised, there is reference to that in the conditions, and they are required to, whoever's doing the construction work, to comply with council's local law when it comes to noise.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Crawford, you had a question?
But can I just clarify, not that it's the matter for the permit, but is the builder allowed to begin work if they have not been signed off by the Owners Corporation?
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding is no, so they need those permissions before they commence. Otherwise, there'd be liabilities against them.
Councillors, are there any further questions for the officers on this report? If not, we have Councillor Brand.
I just want to ask the same question that I asked in the briefings about the plumbing, the third pipe plumbing, and the situation of what we're requiring there and what we don't, and just how that works on an addition like this.
Mr. Gutteridge.
For you, Madam Chair. The circumstances of this site are that these are recently completed townhouses, and they were constructed pursuant to a permit issued circa 2014 by the Minister for Planning, which required the dwellings to incorporate third pipe plumbing to connect to a future reticulated water system. So the buildings are so plumbed. The majority of the dwellings, including this dwelling, also include on-site water tanks, which are in turn plumbed for flushing of toilets. But since this application was lodged with the council, there's been some amendments to the planning controls which now require certain conditions to be placed on permits, mandatory conditions to be placed on permits, one of which pertains to the third pipe system and water tanks. Because of how this has been constructed to date, this dwelling complies with most of those points, but there's one point where there's a few matters that aren't in compliance. The condition is a compulsory one, and we have included it on the permit recommended conditions, and the applicants will then be bound to make whatever modifications are necessary to bring them up to the present day situation. I think there was a question inherent in your question about what would happen to an existing building otherwise, and whether existing structures would need to be retrofitted to meet the condition. We have put that question to the department for their clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Gutteridge. Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? No, we've started the debate. We're in the process of the debate. Please have a seat. Thank you. Councillor Crawford, do you move? And Councillor Copsey to second. Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, I understand the concern of the people that spoke tonight, but it is, given that it is a separate act, we can only vote on the planning permit. So I will be in support of this addition, considering that the Owners Corporation is not against the actual build, which does exist on other properties in the estate. I don't know what you call it.
Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak? Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? If not, then I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Then we'll move to item 6.2, which is 253 to 273 Normanby Road, South Melbourne. And councillors, we have one person that's requested to speak. Miss Claire Somerville, please. Welcome, Miss Somerville. If you please state your name and suburb, please.
Thank you, Claire Somerville. I work in South Yarra, but I'm a resident of Port Melbourne. Thank you. I just wanted to pass on an apology. Mr Andrew Rettig was scheduled to speak this afternoon, but has fallen ill and has asked me to speak on his behalf. Our corporation is very excited about this development, which is the subject of this amendment application, and we're excited to develop this part of the Montague precinct in Fisherman's Bend. We're progressing our detailed design, and this is the reason for this amendment application. For those councillors who were councillors at the time the permit was granted, you might remember the council was eager to ensure that there were stringent environmental sustainability requirements on the permit, and they are reflected in the permit conditions in the permit ultimately granted by the Minister for Planning. We agree with the achievement of those standards within the permit. As part of the detailed design, we identified a need to amend the facade in order to achieve the sustainability requirements. And the proposed amendment to the facade that is proposed within this amendment application is fundamentally directed towards achieving those sustainability requirements. However, it also maintains the architectural excellence of this proposed building. The amendment has been well received by departmental officers on behalf of the Minister. We're pleased to see the assessment of Council's urban designers and the Council officers in supporting this application, and we think the facade is going to look fantastic. We look forward to working with the Minister and the Council as we progress this development, and I commend this amendment application to you.
Thank you, Ms Somerville. Councillors, since that's the only speaker, do you have any questions that you would like to ask Ms Somerville? Councillor Mayor Gross.
Hi. I quite like the Christmas tree shapes, which we've lost now in this new design. They were part of the window structure, were they? And I just wondered why they went. Was it just part of the design or seen to be a necessary outcome?
It was a necessary outcome in order to achieve the sustainability requirement, which related to thermal comfort in the habitable rooms. And so there was some changes that needed to happen to the materiality of the facade.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? If not, we have an office. Have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Pearl to move and Councillor Gross to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to the motion?
It's a pretty straightforward motion that these are coming to us, obviously, because there's a council motion in place that means that these can't be done under delegation and they have to come to us. So this is obviously, this development's come a few different times to this council, and I think the last one also. So I'm happy to support it and put it forward, and thank you for coming this evening and putting the justification forward to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Mayor Gross? No? Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Brand.
Yes, I'd just like to. I think this is an obviously acceptable proposal, mainly on the environmental performance of the building. If it's being improved substantially, that's it's an obvious thing that we need to allow and assist with. But I guess I just want to note for the record that I can't help feeling that the building has lessened as a piece of architecture. I just feel the new facade design sort of, I don't know. I feel like it's become sort of superficial in a way, even though it's based on function. Anyway, I'm just wanting to know. I was really hoping that Mr. Rettig would be here, that I could just ask him in person what he was thinking. But I'm just putting on the record, I feel a bit disappointed in the way it's evolved. But I'm certainly supportive of the purposes for which that has happened.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Bond.
Just for the record, I think it looks better, but looks are not in the planning scheme, and that's not a consideration tonight. So, yeah, happy to support.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Pearl, would you like to close?
No, thank you.
Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? That motion is unanimously supported. Thank you very much. Now we'll move to our last item on the agenda, which is 6.3, and that's Planning Permits Delegates Report from December 2018 to January 2019. Councillor Gross, keen to move?
Keen to move.
And Councillor Simic to second. Would you like to speak to the report, Councillor Gross?
No, thank you. It's a fully comprehensive report as usual.
Councillor Simic. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Well, there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.